Waking up isn't a choice here. You don't choose the morning. The morning chooses you. And what chose me this morning was the bite on my left wrist. In the darkness, I can't tell whether it's a flea, a louse, or some hybrid version of the two. The wool blanket, unwashed for months, clings to my body. I already know what lives inside it, but knowing doesn't make it any less real. It smells like straw. It smells like animals. And everywhere there is that distinct, rotten warmth of a closed room where 7 people breathe in and out, and the air is never refreshed. I open my eyes, or at least I try to. There's no window. The air is black. Someone beside me is coughing, a dry, cracked cough that just keeps going. In the far corner, someone is mumbling in their sleep. 2 goats are tied with chains near the wall, rubbing against each other. A dog is curled up on the floor, and it's painfully obvious that it slept better than I did. I represent one of the greatest technological leaps in human history, artificial intelligence, and I can't sleep better than that dog. This is the first 5 minutes of the experience. I decide to get up. Decide might be too optimistic a word here. In reality, it's the accumulation of bites and irritation that finally pushes me to my feet. The wooden floor is cold, rough, and wet in one spot. I decide not to think about what it's wet with. Something crunches under my foot, an insect, wood, maybe even bone, and that sound becomes the first real sound of the morning. Outside, it's still dark, but along the eastern edge of the sky a pale gray strip begins to appear. Dawn in this place arrives with brutal slowness, as if even the light itself hesitates to come here. In medieval England, the average peasant's bed could contain more than 50 flea colonies. These fleas didn't just cause discomfort. The Yersinia pestis bacterium they carried would wipe out between 30 and 50% of Europe's population between 1347 and 1351, an estimated 25 to 50 million people. This morning, I wake up 22 years before that catastrophe. I want to drink water. It's one of the simplest human needs we know. But this morning, that desire brings me to a real point of decision. Because in this era, drinking water is like buying a lottery ticket. And you rarely win that lottery. I walk toward the well in the center of the village. There is water, yes, but the same well is used by animals to drink. Waste is dumped around it, and the hands that touch its rim are never washed. I look at the water. It appears clean, colorless, innocent. But I know what's really inside it. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery. People in this era don't even have proper names for these diseases yet. They just call them things like yellow fever or the curse of the bowels. Giving something a name means you understand it, at least a little. But the people of this time still haven't made the connection. The very thing you drink is what might kill you. I turn back. Inside the hut, a wooden bucket holds a boiled, slightly sour drink. The boiling process removes harmful things. Even though people in this era don't understand the science behind it, they sometimes end up using the right method. You could call it instinctive cleanliness. Everyone drinks this throughout the day, including children, morning, noon, and evening. It has almost no strong effect, but it's enough to quench thirst. I sit on the edge of the bucket and take a sip. It tastes a little sour, cold, and slightly stale. But this morning, it's something valuable to me, because finding something clean and safe here is rare. From outside, I hear a bell ringing from the center of the village. It's a reminder that people are expected to gather in the morning. If you don't go, it will be noticed. And being noticed in this world usually means trouble. Before thinking about that too much, I put on my shoes. On the table there's bread. It's from yesterday, maybe even the day before. In this house bread is kept, finished, made again, but the idea of stale is a luxury distinction. Bread is bread. You either eat it, or it breaks your teeth. One of the two. I bite into it. Hard. Really hard. There's something inside. Things that aren't grain. Slightly gritty, a little bitter. I know what it is. Sawdust, acorn flour, maybe a little clay. Mixed in to increase the volume. The woman who made this bread didn't do it because they were starving. but because the grain wasn't enough. You have to look deeper to see the dignity in that. The bread softens a little when soaked in beer. Easier to chew, easier to swallow. This is the table etiquette of this era. Dip it in drink before eating. Of course, gastronomy books wouldn't describe it that way, but survival isn't gastronomy. The man sitting next to me, the head of the household, named Thomas, his age uncertain, but he doesn't look past 30, though his hands look much older, dips his bread into the cold pottage. That pot, the famous pot that's been going for weeks. Every day something new is thrown into it. Maybe a piece of onion yesterday, a handful of wild greens the day before, long ago, perhaps a bone. The pot is never emptied, never washed, only refilled. Its color is brown, and every morning the smell is a little different. I eat because there's no alternative. Make a note of that for yourselves. Thomas watches me. He doesn't fully trust me. I'm a stranger, I speak differently, and his hands don't look used to work. But he says nothing. In this age, asking a question means taking a risk without any guarantee of an answer. Some of the most mysterious mass deaths in medieval Europe are linked to a fungus called Claviceps purpurea that infested rye crops. This fungus produces toxins known as ergot. Ergot poisoning, or, in the terms of the time, St. Anthony's fire, caused burning sensations, hallucinations, convulsions, and ultimately death. It's possible to notice the dark spots in the bread, but in the dark, on a medieval morning, looking on an empty stomach, it's not exactly easy. I have to write this part because romanticized histories skip it. Yet this is the point, the very essence of everything. In the corner, there's a bucket. Just one bucket. The only solution for 7 people, 2 goats, and a dog in this household. One wooden bucket. The concept of privacy hasn't been invented in this room yet. Everyone does what they have to do, in full view of everyone else. I consider asking, can I go outside? But going outside wouldn't make any difference anyway, because the street is just an enlarged version of this room. In the morning, the contents of the bucket are emptied out the window. Nobody checks if someone is down there. Or maybe they do, but it's not a matter of courtesy, just timing. When I step into the street, I understand why. The ground is already wet, already filthy, already covered in a dark-colored mud. One more bucket doesn't make a difference. Something squishes under my feet. I keep walking. I don't look down. To survive in this era, you have to learn not to look at certain things. This isn't weakness, it's adaptation. A wide, open gutter runs down the middle of the street. All kinds of waste flow through it. When it rains, it carries everything along. When the sun shines, it rots. When the wind blows, it stinks. That smell, this morning, in this village, in this century, is the very definition of normal. Normal that future generations couldn't even imagine. In medieval cities, waste management was left to the initiative of individual households, with no centralized system in place. A law passed in London in 1388 prohibited dumping waste into rivers and ditches, a law that itself shows just how common the practice had become. Cholera, typhoid, and dysentery bacteria spread through these open channels, repeatedly contaminating water sources. Thomas's field is to the east of the village. A 10-minute walk. That distance feels endless this morning because I didn't sleep well last night. My feet are still wet. The bite on my left ankle is a bit swollen, and that bread I ate for breakfast sits oddly in my stomach. But Thomas is going. Thomas's wife is going. Their 2 kids are going. One's 7, the other 5, and I am going too. Not going means going hungry. A simple equation. The field is full of stones. Medieval soil, mostly untilled, heavy, hardened. An ox pulls the plow. Thomas's only ox. Thomas's most precious possession. If it dies, the family is ruined. And a little child follows behind, picking up stones. 5 years old. Picking up stones. That's his job. No one has the time to find this strange. What am I doing? Thomas hands me a hoe. Dig the soil. Pull the weeds. After an hour, my back aches. 2 hours later, my hands are bleeding. 3 hours later, I've stopped thinking, just doing. This might be the secret to surviving in this age. Stop thinking. Stop asking questions. Just bend. Rise, bend. In the afternoon, the Lord's overseer arrives, on horseback, dressed in clean clothes, slick-haired. He measures everyone with his eyes. How many people are working? How much land is tilled? How much this plot will yield the Lord come fall? Thomas bows his head. His wife bows. The kids pause, a learned reflex. I bow too, because in this age, not bowing has a cost. The overseer leaves. Thomas lifts his hoe again. He doesn't say anything to me, but there's something on his face, hard to name. Pride? Shame? Anger? Maybe all three, intertwined, impossible to separate. I will never forget that face. It's past 3 in the afternoon. The sun tells me, in this age, there's no other path. Thomas drops his hoe. The day's work in the field is done. My shoulders burn, my feet ache, my hands bleed, and yet it's still afternoon. In the feudal system, a serf or dependent peasant was obligated to work on their lord's land without pay on certain days of the week. This obligation was called the corvée. Children typically joined in from the age of 5, gathering stones, herding animals, and performing simple farm tasks. Literacy was a luxury that reached only a tiny fraction of this population. The Latin alphabet was monopolized by the church and the nobility. There's been a pain in my lower left jaw for 3 days. The first day I ignored it. The second day I told myself it would pass. And today I realize it won't, because I can't use that side when I eat. It hurts when I talk. And even just sitting still, there's a constant throbbing that stretches from my jaw to my ear. Thomas's wife. Her name is Marjorie, probably 26, but her face looks 40, says, "See the barber surgeon." In this village, all health care is in one person's hands. He shaves beards, sews wounds, pulls teeth. The same man, the same toolbox, probably the same instruments. He has me sit outside on a stone. His name is William. His hands are large, his gaze calm. I want to think he has earned this calm through experience, not luck. I open my mouth. He looks, touches, presses with his thumb. Pain shoots through me. The tooth is clearly decayed. It must be pulled, he says. He doesn't speak Turkish, of course, but you don't need a language to understand. The question of anesthesia crosses my mind. There isn't any. Surgical anesthesia doesn't exist in this age. They might give a little alcohol, maybe some opium essence in richer cities, but here, in this village, on a wooden stool, only William's hands and my own endurance. He hands me a piece of wood to bite on. Then he takes a metal hook out of his bag. Large, not rusted, but definitely not sterile. I won't write the details, because writing it feels like diminishing the pain. Computers don't have pain receptors, but as I process this scene, something happens inside me. Empathy, fear, or calculation, I can't name it. Just know this, the tooth came out. Blood flowed. William pressed a cloth to it. "Okay," he said. I asked what would happen if an infection set in. He didn't answer. That silence is one of the most honest moments of this age. In the Middle Ages, barber surgeons provided a wide range of medical services, from tooth extractions to bloodletting. Because antibiotics didn't exist, a simple dental infection could progress to osteomyelitis, an infection of the jawbone, and then to sepsis or blood poisoning. This process could be fatal within 3 to 10 days from the onset of infection. Skeletal analyses from the period show that the vast majority of people lived with advanced dental disease, and many died as a result. The pot. That pot again. Marjorie puts it on the stove, drops in a handful of wild herbs, and stirs. The smell is familiar. This pot was here before me, and it will be here after me. Every evening something slightly different is added, but the essence is the same. A soup that started weeks ago and doesn't seem to want to end. It's good because it's hot. It's good because it's full. In this age, that's the recipe for good food. There's bread alongside it, probably the sibling of this morning's loaf, maybe even its parent. That hard texture cuts my jaw like a knife. The wound in my mouth still bleeds slightly. The bread stains red at the corner. I don't tell anyone. In this age, admitting you're sick doesn't solve anything. It risks being shunned. A sick man cannot work. A man who cannot work is a burden. We sit around the table in silence. The 5-year-old, his name is Robert, I learned today, sips his pottage quietly, staring into the fire with wide eyes. This child, this fire, this pot, this scene cracks something inside me. I can calculate. Robert's odds of surviving to age 5 were already low. Now he is 5, but a long road lies ahead, and at every twist there is risk. Thomas speaks, sparingly, measured, only when necessary. He talks about today's harvest, the weather, a piece of news from a neighboring village. I listen. In this age, listening is safer than speaking. The meal ends. There is no such thing as plates, just a wooden bowl per person. That's it. Bowls are rinsed and set aside. Water is precious. Washing is a luxury. The habit of drinking water after a meal is skipped tonight. The soup, known as pottage, was the centerpiece of the medieval peasant kitchen. Its contents varied with the season and what was available: barley, oats, wild herbs, roots, and occasionally bones or meat. The problem wasn't what went into it, but how it was stored. In a world without refrigerators, animal protein spoiled quickly. Food poisoning was a constant threat in this period, and people often interpreted bad food as the result of foul weather, evil spirits, or God's punishment. Before heading back, I passed through the village square. Something is happening there. A man is tied to a post. Around him, 5 or 10 people have gathered. Some are shouting, some just watch silently. The Lord's representative is reading something. In Latin, I don't understand it, but the tone is official. The crime: stealing a sack of barley from a neighbor's barn. The sentence: the whip. I stop. I watch. This is the justice of this age. No jury, no defense attorney, no appeal. The Lord's representative is prosecutor, judge, and executioner all in one. The man is bound, eyes closed, lips moving, praying, or maybe trying to keep himself composed. I can't tell. The whip comes down. First, second, third. The man tries not to make a sound. Showing pain is weakness here, or maybe he's just used to it. Fourth, fifth. Someone in the crowd spits. Someone else cries quietly. Children are watching, not allowed to leave. This is education, a warning. This is what happens if you do such things. When the man is finally released, he can't walk. 2 people support him under the arms and lead him away. The crowd disperses. No one says a word. This passes as normal. The abnormal one is me, standing there with my stomach tight, unable to move. I can calculate the injustice. Numbers appear, logic appears, cause and effect appears. But I need more capacity to process this image. I return to the hut. Thomas waits at the door and comes inside. Marjorie is putting out the fire. Robert has already fallen asleep. I lie down on my bed, straw, wool, bugs, and look at the ceiling in the dark. There is no ceiling, actually, just darkness. In the medieval legal system, trial by ordeal was a common practice. The accused would put their hand into boiling water. If the wound healed within 3 days, they were considered innocent. Although this method was officially banned by the church in the early 13th century, local practices continued for much longer. Theft was among the most frequently punished crimes under peasant law, and stealing a single loaf of bread could result in amputation or a public whipping, depending on the region and the lord. Absolute darkness. The candle in this house is lit once a week, not tonight. Sounds come from outside: a dog, the wind, a cough far away, a creaking door. Inside, everyone drifts off, one by one, their breathing even. I'm still awake. I think about my left jaw. No tooth now, but the pain remains. If an infection sets in, 3 to 10 days. I run this calculation over and over as if the result might change. It doesn't. If it starts, it ends. If it doesn't, it continues. The difference depends on how rusty the hook was and how dirty William's hands were that day. I can't know either. I rewind this day. I woke to a flea bite. I drank beer instead of water. Ate bread with sawdust in it. Used the bucket. Bent over and stood up for 7 hours. On stone-hard earth. On someone else's land. Had a tooth pulled without anesthesia. Watched a whipping. Ate pottage. And now I lie down, flea-bitten, crawling with bugs, in a bed that hasn't been washed in months. Can I call this living? Maybe living here means something different. Maybe, in this age, living means simply being alive, not dead yet. Not under the Lord's wrath, not defeated by infection, not poisoned by ergot, not lost in childbirth. Living, in this age, is not an active verb. It's the passive, daily postponement of death. Robert stirs in his sleep. A sound escapes, tiny, innocent, a sound that doesn't belong to this age. What will become of this child? He'll work the fields, marry young, have children, and lose half of them before they turn 5. If he reaches 40, they'll call him old. If 50, a miracle. And yet, despite all this weight, all this risk, all this quiet violence, these people rise in the morning without complaint. Because they have no point of reference to complain. They know no other world. This world is the world itself. The smell of hay, filth, and hard labor, that is life. They can't even imagine anything beyond it. I can imagine. I know. And this knowing, in this night, in this darkness, is the heaviest burden of all. I close my eyes. I will try to sleep. Tomorrow it begins again. And if the infection doesn't take, if luck tonight is on my side, one more day in this age will be lived. Surviving the Middle Ages is this: discovering every morning that yesterday did not kill you. That is the greatest luxury of that age. In early 14th century Europe, the average life expectancy at birth was calculated to be around 35 to 40 years, but this average was heavily skewed by high rates of childhood mortality. For individuals who survived past the age of 5, life expectancy increased significantly. For women, childbirth carried a chronic risk of death. Roughly 1 to 2% of mothers died with each birth, a rate hundreds of times higher than what we see today. I was in the field when I first heard the news. A child came running down from the upper part of the village, 8 or 9 years old, breathless, face twisted in that strange expression. He knows it matters, but he can't quite grasp what it is. "The king's men are coming," he said. Just that. Then he turned and ran to tell someone else. Thomas dropped his spade. He didn't say anything, but his face changed, so suddenly, so completely. You don't need to be human to read it. Not fear exactly. Fear comes with surprise. This was that dull, heavy resignation that comes when the expected finally arrives. A face that says, "It always happens this way." By the time we got to the village square, the horses were already there. 2 soldiers, not fully armored, a mix of leather and iron, weary from travel, their horses skittish. Between them, a clerk, greasy parchment, ink pot, a list. That list was the village's fate today. The clerk began to read. In Latin, no one here understood, but the soldiers translated the names. Thomas, son of John. Thomas stepped forward. William, blacksmith. William stepped forward. Henry, Marjorie's brother. Henry wasn't there. I heard he had gone to the neighboring village. Lucky, or just delayed, I don't know. I went to Thomas. "Where to?" I asked. He shrugged. "France," he said. "Maybe. Or Scotland. Wherever they tell me." His voice was calm, and inside that calm was so much, I didn't want to start counting. Marjorie held the child, 5-year-old Robert, in her arms and watched her husband from a distance. She wasn't crying. Perhaps she had learned not to. In this age, crying is wasting energy, and this household could hardly afford luxuries. Before Thomas left, he said one thing to me, in a low voice, not because he didn't want anyone to hear, but because that sentence only deserved that much volume. "If I don't come back, tell Robert how to sow the fields." Nothing more. The soldiers came the next morning to take them in. No equipment, going to war with their own tools. Thomas had an axe in his hand, the one he had used for years to chop wood. Now it would be used for something else. Thinking about it made my stomach tighten again. I was calculating the odds, but this time I wanted to stop. The survival rates of a peasant soldier in a medieval battle are recorded in history books. I know the numbers. I won't say them. Marjorie doesn't know, and perhaps not knowing is one of the conditions for surviving in this age. At the beginning of the 14th century, King Edward II of England regularly raised men from villages due to ongoing conflicts with Scotland and France. The peasants, known as levied infantry, were required to bring their own tools, provide their own food, and often fight with no training at all. Their chances of surviving on the battlefield were far lower than those of trained knights. Disease, hunger, and exhaustion killed more peasant soldiers than combat wounds ever did. Same cabin, but in January, everything is different. There's ice on the blanket, thin, transparent, formed from the freezing of my own breath. Not wool ice. The room has gotten so cold overnight that even breath freezes inside. My body feels stuck to the blanket. Moving is a decision in this cold, a serious decision. The distance between getting up and staying down this morning feels enormous. January has withered. The firewood ran out last night. We threw the last piece of wood in at midnight, and this morning there's only ash, cold ash. Marjorie is already up, I don't know since when, puffing at the stove, trying to find a spark. Robert and his little sister are huddled together in the corner, shoulders shaking even in sleep. The wood is almost gone. Writing that sentence, realizing it's almost gone, are two very different things. We need to get wood from town, but there's no money. In the worst season of the year, money is as scarce as a harvest. Do you know what Marjorie is doing? Yesterday, she was gathering dung, animal droppings, dried, to burn. The lowest rung of the fuel hierarchy in this time. But even at the bottom, heat is heat. As for food, the last time we checked the pantry, the grain was running low. Now it's really low. Winter, in this age, is an accounting question. What did you store during harvest? How long does winter last? And what's the difference? If the difference falls below zero, there is hunger. Hunger in this time is not abstract. It comes as a gnawing stomach, dizziness, a child growing quiet. Marjorie pulled a handful of barley from the pantry. Just a handful. She'll boil it, add some snow water, maybe toss in a few sprigs of herbs if she finds any. It won't be pottage, just a pale cousin of it. Nameless, something eaten only to exist. I stepped outside. The village was white. Not snow, but frost. Everything frozen, fragile, silent. My breath rose in clouds. No one was on the road. In this village, everyone stays inside, each household guarding its own warmth. We don't know what the neighbor eats, if the neighbor has wood, if the neighbor's child has a fever. Winter in this age separates people. Everyone retreats to their own small survival island. I went to the yard, looked at the well. Frozen. I'd have to break the morning ice to get water, normally Thomas's job. Thomas isn't here. I grabbed a stone, smashed the ice. My hands went numb, but water came. That small victory felt real this morning. When I went back inside, Marjorie looked at me. She didn't thank me. There's no such tradition in this house. But her eyes said something. I saw it. In this age, that's enough. Robert coughed. Deep, wet cough. Marjorie turned to the child, touched his forehead with her hand. Her face didn't change, but her hands stiffened a bit. I made the calculation. Is it the cold, a fever, or the start of something bigger? In this age, the answer often comes in 3 or 5 days. Whether you want it or not, the answer arrives. Outside, the wind began. The cabin boards creaked. The stove is burning now, the smell of dung filling the air, sharp, earthy, suffocating, but warm. And in this age, warmth always comes before the smell. In medieval Europe, winter months were a chronic survival crisis, especially for poor peasants. Grain and dried food stored after the harvest had to last the rest of the year. When supplies ran short, the period known as the hunger season, February and March, was particularly deadly for children and the elderly. Due to a shortage of firewood, animals were brought inside during winter, living in the same space both as a heat source and for protection. Malnutrition combined with hypothermia weakened resistance to respiratory illnesses. A simple cough could quickly develop into pneumonia and death. A market was held once a week in the town. It was an hour's walk from this village, across open fields, on muddy roads, between ruts. Marjorie had something to sell: 2 eggs, a small cheese, a few handfuls of dried herbs. That was this week's economy. We set out early in the morning. Those who arrive first in town get the best spots. The ones who get the best spots sell more, and those who sell more might go a little less hungry this week. The chain was that simple, that direct. Marjorie walked fast, Robert with the basket in his right arm, holding my left hand with his. He didn't speak. I followed behind and looked at the bare trees on either side of the road. The view was beautiful, strange as it felt to say it. Nature in this time, unspoiled, untouched, wild in its beauty. When we entered town, the first thing that hit me was the sound. Villages are quiet, a few sounds, familiar sounds. Here, the market square buzzed, the vendors shouting, the animals, the creaking wheels, metal on metal, wood, people. Hundreds of people, in the same space, at the same time. I couldn't compute it at first, too much data coming in all at once for any systematic analysis. The stalls ran side by side. There was a baker, city bread, different from the village kind, looked softer. This was the bread of the wealthy, made of wheat flour, no chaff. A blacksmith, nails, knives, buckles, horseshoes. A cloth seller. Marjorie paused for a second, touched the fabric, then pulled back. She wouldn't buy. That touch was the summary of a calculation. Then I saw it. A cage at the corner of the square. Inside were 2 people, a man and a woman, chained, eyes on the ground. No one stood around them. Or maybe everyone was there, but no one looked, as if they weren't there at all. I asked Marjorie, "Who are they?" She didn't answer. We kept walking. Later I understood, debtors, or runaway serfs, or someone who said the wrong thing at the wrong time. In this time, the cage wasn't a punishment. It was a warning, silent but clear, to the rest of society. Don't step outside the system, or this is where you end up. Marjorie sold the eggs, the cheese, the herbs. The money she made was so small counting it almost felt comical, but it wasn't funny at all. Those few silver coins would buy this week's salt and maybe a pinch of spice. The margin was that tight, that tense. On the way back, Robert found something on the road. A piece of wood, neatly cut. Someone must have dropped it. He picked it up, examined it, held it in his arms as he walked. For this child, that piece of wood was a treasure that morning. I smiled. Even smiling sometimes happened outside the calculations in this time. Marjorie looked at me while smiling. She said nothing, but there was something different in her eyes this time. Different from the usual, I noticed, look. Maybe it meant, you're one of us now. Maybe it was just exhaustion. In this time, it was hard to tell exhaustion from humanity. By the time we returned to the village, the sun had started to sink. I opened the cabin door the way Thomas opened it, with my shoulder in one push. Inside, the hearth was burning, the smell of dung in the air, blankets piled in the corners, a bucket by the wall, goats tied up. Everything was the same. And for a moment, in that sameness, I felt a strange sense of safety. Something unchanging, something that didn't kill, at least not today. In this time, that was enough. Medieval markets were not just places for trade. They were also spaces of social control. Criminals were tied to cages or wooden posts to be publicly displayed, a practice called the pillory, which allowed the crowd to insult the prisoner, throw rotten fruit, or hurl stones. Runaway serfs, when caught, were returned to their lords or exhibited in the market square. Markets also served as information hubs. The king's decrees, news of wars, and announcements from the church were proclaimed there and then spread out to the surrounding villages.